All right. Go ahead and grab a seat when you're done. Wow, I guess we should have given you more time. How many of you said a sports movie? Like your favorite is like a true sports story? Okay, how many of you said love story, like a true love story? Anybody go true love story? How many of you said Back to the Future? If you have Back to the Future. People are like, I'm not sure that's a true story, but do you really know? We don't know. It could be a true story. We're not quite sure. So my favorite true story that was turned into first a book and then a movie was Unbroken, which is the story of Louis Zamperini, who was an amazing runner. And as he was preparing to go to the Olympics, he was drafted and then served in World War II, shot down, and then was a POW for a long time. And I can't remember how many days he was at sea when the plane was shot down before 47? Yeah. Somebody likes it better than me. 47 days at sea, he survived. And when they thought they might have made it, they actually were captured, and he was a prisoner of war. Crazy story. What the movie doesn't show is that he actually came to Christ, I think, at a Billy Graham crusade or through the ministry of Billy Graham. And so, Sue, if you haven't read the book Unbroken, you should read the book Unbroken. It's really good. And nowadays, they actually have audio books that if you don't like reading, you can just listen to it, or you can watch the movie. How are you doing? You doing okay? It's at the movies. We're here. I'm so glad, like I said, that you're here. We got a number of things going on that I want to let you know about. May is a water drive. So for us, we are always saying we are growing in our compassion and love for other people in practical ways. And one of the ways we do that is in a simple water drive where we invite you to bring cases of water. And some of the most vulnerable in our city during the summer months are those who are living on the streets. And so we work with some local partners to distribute this water in ways that can be most helpful to them. And so I want to invite you to bring cases, as many as you can, during this month. Just bring them during the week, bring them on Sundays, bring them whenever you can, and just drop them off in the lobby, and then we'll deliver them with our ministry partners to those who need them most. May is also the month of, I don't know if you knew this, but it's Mother's Day in May. Don't forget. So I'm giving you a heads up, guys, that it's Mother's Day. You need to call your moms and bring them something, write a nice letter. Also, we do baby blessings on Mother's Day, which is always a great time in our service to be introduced to our newest additions. And I know we've already got, I think, 10 or 11, but if you have had a baby recently, we'd love to celebrate that with you and introduce you to the congregation. And then we always do Grad Sunday, so it's a day to celebrate our grads before we send them off. And so we have a number of graduates. If you know a grad or you have a grad in your family, whether it's high school or college or post-grad, we love to celebrate all those things. And then summer is the time we send so many of our kids to camp. And here's the deal that has become a challenge is, I don't know if you've noticed, but things have gotten more expensive in the last 3 years. And so our camp costs have continued to rise. We've tried to help offset that with some of our budget. But one of the ways that we're helping our students this year is through this golf tournament. So it's a golf tournament we've never done in this time of year. I say the spring, but it's going to be really hot. And we need 4 or 5 more teams to participate to help really make it a success. So if you've been on the fence, jump in and be a part of this golf tournament. Or if you're someone who would say, you know, man, I'm not going to be here, I'm going to be gone, but I would love to help out, let us know that you'll sponsor a team, and I will find the golfers to fill those teams. because we often have some people who are like, I'd love to participate, but I can't afford the whole cost. So if you're someone who wants to sponsor a team and you don't want to play, let us know. We'd make that possible. So thanks for jumping in and being a part of it to support our kids to get to camp. Here's the cool thing about this golf tournament is we're having the students who are actually earning money work the tournament. Yep, you want to see them work? Then be there. It's in the afternoon in late May, so it's going to be hot out there. So it's going to be awesome to see our kids. I can't wait to see Charlie lugging clubs around. We should make them caddy. That's what we should do, like walk the 18 holes. Yes? Yes? Hard work? Yeah. That means we have to walk. Yeah, no, we're out. Just a little give and take today. This is going to be fun. So that's the things that are going on, and as always, I just want to thank those of you who contribute to McDowell, whether it's through things like the golf tournament or just regular giving. You're helping us move the ministry forward, the mission forward with what God's called us to do. And when you give here, you're giving not only to what you see around the place, but you're also giving to our local and global ministry partners that are expanding the kingdom all around the world. Ryan, our missions pastor, he had a tough week this week. He was in Switzerland. And one of our main ministry partners is working to build young pastors in Europe and the Middle East. And Ryan had the opportunity to spend a week with young leaders from churches, local churches like ours, from Egypt to, I know there were a couple from Lebanon that were there. Germany, there was a group there. So pastors from all over that region. Oh, there was a pastor and his wife from the Ukraine. Stefan was there. And so Ryan got to spend the week encouraging those pastors, building them up. And so I love that we get to support ministries like that. And, Europe is the place where they say, it's definitely a post-Christian world. And we need young leaders in the church to build it up. So thank you for your giving and for being a part of that. I feel so bad for Ryan that he had to spend the week in Switzerland. All right, so today we're at the movies, and before we jump into our movie today, the question I always get asked around this time of year is, why do we do at the movies? Like, why go to church and see clips from a movie and talk about it? So 3 things I want to give you to think about. Number 1, Jesus often used stories to illustrate and build truth into people who might not get it in another way. So it's one thing to stand up in a lecture hall and listen to someone give us tidbits of information, knowledge. It's a whole nother thing to see a story play out and find truth and wisdom in the story that makes sense and connects with our everyday life. And that's why Jesus used parables, because he knew when he told stories, people would see things that they wouldn't see if he just stood up and taught. And so stories just have this way of engaging us and opening our minds to something different. Number 2, there's often powerful truths that live in our favorite movie moments. There's things that we can go back to in our minds from movies that are just powerful. And so we want to bring these moments out and help us see the world differently. And sometimes movies can help us do that. And then number 3, come on, movies are just fun. And they're a great way to spur conversation. Every year when we do this series, it's always interesting to me because you start talking about whatever movie it is, and throughout the whole week, I'll run into you at the coffee shop or somewhere, and you're like, oh, did you remember this part from this movie? Or when you said this on Sunday, it made me think of this. I love how it just spurs conversation, and it brings some joy to us. So that's why we do the movie series. We've done some great movies through the years, and this year is going to be a couple of movies that are under the radar. I know last year we started with Maverick. Holy cow, it was loud in here. This year, we're not starting with a movie that's super loud like that, but I'm excited about this movie. We're starting with The Boys in the Boat. And some of you have seen the movie already. I will say I have heard from many people that the book is better than the movie. And wow, there we go. So Here's one of the reasons why the book is better than the movie, is because the book is able to develop the characters and the story in ways that the movie just doesn't have time. And so the characters and the story is really, they're developed in the book in ways that you can't see in the movie. So Daniel James Brown wrote the book, and George Clooney is the one who produced the movie, directed and produced the movie. So he was the one who put it all together. What I want to do this morning, I want to give you kind of an overview starting of the movie and kind of what's happening. We're going to see two clips. The second one is really long, but we're going to see two clips, and I'm going to push you to think about certain things that are happening. Now, the story takes place in the early 1930s. It's a true story, based on a true story, and in the early 1930s, there was a reality in the United States called the Great Depression. And during the times of the Great Depression, there were many families and individuals who just could not find work and had to find different ways to survive on their own that we can't even relate to. Many of us cannot even relate to what some of them were dealing with in those days. And this story hones in on a man, a boy at the time named Joe Rance. And Joe Rance lived in the Pacific Northwest and had some really difficult life circumstances. What we find in the story is that Joe Rance is at the University of Washington. Somehow he's made it to the University of Washington. He's been able to pay some of his tuition, but he's about to get kicked out of college because he can't afford to pay for the rest. And he's looked for jobs, but there are just no jobs to be found. And as you can imagine, all these kids who have had nothing are fighting for the jobs that are available. And they're just trying to find ways to earn money to be able to make it through college. So you got Joe Rance, who's the main character. And then you got Coach Al Ulbrichtson, who is the coach of the row squads. So you have these rowing teams. And at the time, in the 30s, rowing was like one of the biggest sports. Rowing. Boats. And what's interesting to me is I thought, before I watched the movie and understood anything about rowing, I thought, I mean, how can you even be a spectator at a rowing event? Because you either see the start of the race or you see the end of the race, but you can't see the whole race. That seems terrible. And then I realized in the movie, you'll see they actually loaded trains, like observation cars, and followed the race down the river, which is super crazy that they could do that, but that seems like, oh, that would be kind of cool. Anyway, so crew, 8-man crew is kind of what's happening here. Coach Al Ulbrichtson, who's a major part of Joe's life and encouragement in his life. George Pocock, who is the shell builder. He's the one who actually builds the boat. He becomes like a mentor to Joe. He plays a big role in the book and in the movie. In fact, in the book, almost every chapter starts with a quote, and so many of those are from George Pocock. Just some brilliant wisdom that he speaks, and some real faith foundation that he kind of puts in Joe's life, I believe. And then Joyce Simdars is a girl that Joe actually knew from his younger years of school. They kind of got disconnected because of some of the things that happened to Joe. They run into each other again at the University of Washington, and then she becomes a major part of his life. They actually end up getting married on graduation day. When they graduate from the University of Washington, spoiler alert, they make it through college. They get married on graduation day, and they're married for 62 years, the two of them. So it's this beautiful love story as well. That's not really what the book is about, but it's there in the midst. So these are major players in the movie. So I want to give you some big themes that are going to play out in the scenes, and I want to encourage you to think about these themes as you're watching the different scenes that we're going to watch. Themes and scenes. Oh man. I need to think of these things earlier. So here are the themes I want you to think about. Hard work, humility, pain. What do we do with pain in life? Trust, How do we learn to trust one another and God? And then team. What does a team look like? And these are the different themes I think are primary in the book. So again, for this first scene that I'm setting up, the first couple little scenes, we find Joe, who has to find a job, or else he's going to get kicked out of college. So he's got to find a job. He finds an opportunity, but he's got to then work to make this opportunity a reality. Does that make sense? Now, overarching the whole story is in 1936, the winner of nationals, the national crew team, whoever wins the nationals will eventually get to go to Berlin and race in the Olympics, in the 1936 Olympics. So that's kind of overarching the whole story. Are you with me? Yeah. All right, so first scene, here we go. This is Joe Rance, Boys in the Boat. Hey McDowell, it is At the Movies, one of our favorite series of the year. People have been asking me, hey, what movies are we doing? And today is the first movie.
The Boys in the Boat
Yes.
is the name of it. It was based on a book that we'll talk about in a second. And it's a great movie, but due to licensing concerns, we can't actually show you the clip online. And so we're gonna try to describe what's going on here and set up a little bit of what's happening in this scene.
And we're even gonna give you a little bit of behind the scenes stories that are happening that they probably won't get in the room this Sunday. Now, I do wanna invite you back next Sunday because we have another movie that we're gonna be showing. And there's just something special about being in the room, seeing it on the big screen, with others. So be here next Sunday for At the Movies. But today, we're gonna talk about this rowing journey and the importance of rowing together in the same direction, at the same time, in sync. And the story is about an 8-man crew team, and how that comes together is a pretty crazy story.
Yeah.
So let's talk through just the first couple of scenes and what's happening.
Yeah, so the story follows the main character, Joe Rance, played by Callum Turner, and he's very poor. It's in the Great Depression.
Days of the Great Depression, yeah, coming out of the Great Depression, and he has just had a really difficult life, but he's made it to the University of Washington, and his really good friend, Roger Morris, is also has some challenges. They have some challenges paying for college, and they're looking for a job. They cannot find a job anywhere.
Yeah, it's very hard to come across work, and so they hear about this opportunity, like a lot of people do, that, hey, the rowing team will actually pay for your school. So they show up, and there's 175 guys trying out for an 8-man crew.
There's kind of this funny little scene where Joe and Roger are standing there, and Joe's like, hey, do you know how many people actually make the team amidst 175 other kids? And he's like, yeah, I'm not really sure. But he knows only 8 people make the team. So it's a pretty challenging tryout to get to the finals and make it to the 8. But they both make it.
Yeah, this clip is kind of showing some of the tryouts, the hard work. I mean, it's a lot of work. Actually, it took the actors about 5 months to actually get to the point where they looked like a realistic row team. It is a difficult sport, and you see that in these first scenes. But then let's fast forward a little bit. They're actually in the boat. They make the team. They're training, and
each place on the boat has a different responsibility. There's a different piece to it. But the goal of the 8-man crew team is actually to become one, which there's all kinds of great lessons in that. So there's 8 who have individual strengths. They try to get to the place where they're rowing together. Each seat matters to move the boat as fast as possible. There's Coach Al Ulbrichtson.
Yeah.
And then there's also another guy who shows up that's really important. He becomes a mentor to Joe Rance and some of the other boys on the boat.
So George Pocock, the mentor played by Peter Guinness, is there's this great relationship that happens between Joe and George.
He's the shell maker.
The shell maker, which is the person who makes the boats. And turns out that Joe had a background from his dad in some woodworking, and so George enlists Joe's help to make the boat. And this great relationship starts, and he starts teaching Joe some lessons about the importance of teamwork. And it actually asks, are your parents excited to see you race?
For the first time, because he's never raced. And he's like, are your parents going to show up to the race? And Joe says, well, my mom died when I was young, and my dad figured I was better off alone. And we get this little picture into Joe's life that is really sad. Because we find in this moment that Joe's dad actually left him when Joe was like 13 or 14 years old. And Joe has had to raise himself, and he finds himself in this place now where he's without parents.
So let's jump in back in the room with everybody else.
A couple little pieces here before we get into the meat of the story. In some of Paul's writing, Paul was one of the very first Christians, and when he was writing to the early church, it's interesting how he tied the ways that we were to be in community together to operate in such a way, almost like a team, or what he said was a body. So he said this about the human body. The human body has many parts, but the many parts make up one body. So it is with the body of Christ. If the whole body were an eye, how would you hear? If the whole body were an ear, how would you smell anything? But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each one where he wants it. Now, this is so important when it comes to a team, and we understand this, right? When you see a team, like a crew team, he keeps moving people around to get the right people in the right places. We understand it if you are a fan of football, basketball, baseball, hockey, like any team sport, you have to get the right people in the right place. Many of you can't stand sports. But this is true when it comes to business as well, isn't it? Getting the right people in the right places, not just getting the right people on the right bus, but getting them in the right seat on the bus so that that can operate at the right place. Well, that's exactly what this coach is trying to do. He's trying to get the people, the boys, in the right place so that the boat can be the most successful that it could be. That's what we see playing out. Now, what we find here at the end is that there's a certain part of this team that has some significant challenges in his life. I don't want you to miss this. This is so important to the story. Did you hear how old he was when his dad left him? 13 years old. Almost 14. 13 years old. His dad and his stepmom decided that they had to go somewhere else to work. It's better in the book than it is the movie. But he comes home from school one day, and the family is in the car, and they're just waiting to see him so they can say goodbye. Can you imagine being 13 years old and seeing your family drive away and your dad saying, you can take care of yourself? I mean, what do you do with that? Like, how do you process that? And how do you not only survive, how do you learn to trust anyone when the very people who knew you the best walked away from your life? That's what Joe has to figure out in order to be the best component of the team that he can. Paul writes this, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." What? I mean, Paul, come on. Like when any troubles come your way, consider an opportunity for great joy. And here's what he says, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be whole and complete, needing nothing." It's just this interesting passage of truth that Paul writes, that opportunities to develop endurance have to be painful at times and difficult at times. And what's interesting when you look at the world in which we live, come on, let's be honest about this. When you look at the world in which we live, we avoid pain and challenge at almost every cost, don't we? No, seriously, let's be honest. Don't we? We run from pain. We run from challenge, and what Paul is saying is that sometimes it's in working through challenges that we can actually find the very joy and success that we all need in life. Now, athletes understand this. Athletes understand, musicians understand this. Like I think about Stacy and Greg, our guitar players, or Jordan, who was standing here. When you start playing an electric guitar, I'm not going to play his electric guitar because he'll be mad at me. Maybe. But when you start playing electric guitar, the ends of your fingers have to develop calluses. And there is great pain that you must work through in order to be proficient on the guitar. It just doesn't happen overnight. The pain must be endured to create the endurance to be able to actually play the instrument. Does that make sense? When you're training to run or compete, building a base is not easy. You actually have to push through the pain in order to build the endurance so that you can experience the joy of success of whatever it is that you're trying to develop. This is true in almost all of life. Marriage. Robin and I, we often, when we talk about our marriage, the first year was the most difficult for us. It was such a challenge because we thought we knew each other, but when you live together, you realize you didn't know what you thought you knew. And it would be easy when things get tough to just walk out and throw up your hands and think, oh, it'd be easy. I'm just going to go somewhere else. But guess what? Wherever you are, there you are. And you have to eventually face the challenges. Pocock, the shell builder. This is in, I think, chapter 4 of the book. He says this about the boat. It's hard to make the boat go as fast as you want. The enemy, of course, is resistance of the water, because you have to displace the amount of water equal to the weight of the men and the equipment. But that very water is what supports you, and that very enemy is your friend. And such is life. The very problems you must overcome also support you and make you stronger in overcoming them. Isn't that interesting? I wonder if that's what Paul was saying, or what he was insinuating, is that when you get through the challenges, that's when you build the endurance so that you might find joy in life. There's this story in the Old Testament, and it's the story of Ruth. And it's such a short book, it's 4 chapters. I would encourage you to go read the book of Ruth. Such a powerful book. Naomi leaves their homeland. She goes to Moab, and in Moab, she loses her husband and her kids. They all die. And Ruth is her daughter-in-law who ends up going back to her homeland. And as they come back into town, there's this really interesting moment. They're coming back into town, and some people see her, and they're like, oh, is this Naomi? This is Naomi. And she says this to her friends, don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made my life very bitter for me. The word Mara means bitter. Call me bitter. That seems like someone you want to hang out with. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. What do we do with the challenges, the difficulties, and the pain of our lives? What do you do with some of the things that other people have done to you in life? Joe has this underlying reality in his life. And in this next scene, he actually comes face to face with it. And what we're going to see is that he has this moment right before nationals where he's about to enter the biggest race, which will eventually offer them the opportunity to get to Berlin. He runs into somebody who reminds him of his past, and it throws him off his rhythm completely. And he has to decide, what am I going to do with the pain? That's a reality of my life. So this is the next scene. This is a little bit longer scene. Hang with us. We'll get there. Are you okay? Are you still with me? Yeah, hang with us. It's a little bit longer, but don't take off, because there's some challenges for all of us at the end. Here we go. So there's other pieces to this story going on behind the scenes, and one of the ones that we only get a couple glimpses of in the scenes that we're showing is the story of Joe and Joyce. He meets Joyce actually when he's younger in school, but then he runs into her at the University of Washington.
Yeah, and their relationship is really sweet. She's really cheering for him, and they it's funny because they even help each other in school a little bit. And the true story is that they not only get married, but they stay married for 63 years, have 5 kids. Yeah. It's truly a wonderful story. And so she's behind the scenes. She's a big motivation for Joe to keep going. And so that's a really cool
we
part.
see her a couple times in these clips. This next clip starts with the two of them at a cafe, and they're kind of near like a downtown area, and they're sitting there and they're eating, and Joe kind of glances over. This is before they go to nationals to compete. Joe glances out the window and he sees a man in a truck who stops to unload some lumber, and he recognizes him. It's his dad.
Yeah, his dad Harry's there.
Yeah, and Joe gets up from the table, tells Joyce he'll be back, and he goes outside and he has this moment with his dad, almost like a little bit of a confrontation.
Yeah, and he's like, I didn't know you were in town. And come to find out, Harry tells him that, well, we moved back to this area a few years ago. He's like, you've been here all this time, and
You didn't tell me?
You didn't tell me.
Yeah.
You didn't say hi. And
then his dad says, like, well, you seem to be doing fine.
Yeah.
Like, no big deal that we were here and we didn't tell you we were here.
Which is not really true. He's not doing fine, but he has had this success on the rowing team. And so the rowing is on the radio and people are hearing about it. And so his dad obviously thinks that he's doing good.
Yeah.
But then, he tries to push his dad a little bit, like, you left me. I was 14, and it was really tough. And it's still, obviously for Joe, it's still a very difficult situation. Yeah. He's on the verge of being homeless. He doesn't have any money.
His dad looks at him in this moment and he's like, well, what do you want? Do you want to move home? I'll pay you $1 a day if you can still cut down trees like you used to do. And they have, there's some definite tension going on in this moment. And then his dad says something to him, which is gut-wrenching. His dad looks at him and he says, Joe, you don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything. Like, as your father, he makes this statement of like, you're doing fine on your own, you don't need me, I don't need you. And his dad gets in his truck and drives away and really leaves Joe to kind of deal with, what do I do having been disowned by my father, and feeling like he's all alone. And what we find from this clip and where the story takes us is Joe having this moment with his dad of distrust begins to really unravel. It unravels in the boat with the other guys. It's like he doesn't trust them anymore.
Yeah, 8-man rowing is one of the most difficult team sports because everybody has to be in sync. And so the clip goes to them actually working on getting to nationals. Now, it's a big deal that they're even going to nationals because they announce, hey, we're not going to take our varsity boat. We're going to take the JV boat.
Which Joe's a part of.
Which Joe's a part of, and he makes that team miraculously, and then they beat out the varsity boat, and so the coach takes a risk. Al Ulbrichsen, a lot is riding on his shoulders. Yeah. Like, he's taken a risk by selecting this JV team, and Joe's a big part of that team. Yeah. And so because of this interaction with his dad, you can see his mind's not in the right spot.
Yeah. So they actually get to the preparations for nationals, and you can just see in these scenes the boys in the boat are not in sync at all, and they can't figure out what's wrong. But Coach Ulbrichsen kind of sees what's going on, and he calls the boys in one day at practice, actually the night before the big race of nationals. He calls them in, they row the boat over to the side, and Ulbrichsen goes right to Joe, and he says, "Where's your head, Joe?" And Joe's like, it's in the boat, I'm here. And he's like, no, it's not. And really like yells at him. I mean, he has this moment of like really getting after him. And he's like, do you want me to take you out of this boat? And Joe kind of looks over and under his breath says, I don't care. And Coach Ulbertson says, then get out. And the day before nationals, Joe is kicked out of the boat. And they have a guy
alternate,
on hold, an alternate, and so they put him in the boat. The scene then jumps to Joe going back to his room where
his friend Roger. His friend Roger is trying to tell him, like, go ask for your spot back on the team. And Joe's just packing up his stuff. He's pretty much decided, like, no, it's not worth it, you know? And probably, again, getting in his head from this interaction from his dad. And at that moment, his mentor, George comes to the door and says, hey, I'm about to put the final coat on the shell, on the boat, and I need your help.
Yeah. There's this quote in the book from George Pocock, who's the one who builds all the shells and kind of becomes this mentor. He says this, it's hard to make the boat go as fast as you want it to. The enemy, of course, is resistance of the water, as you have to displace the amount of water equal to the weight of men and equipment. But that very water, this is so interesting, that very water is what supports you, and that very enemy is your friend. So is life. The very problems you must overcome also support you and make you stronger in overcoming them. And he and George have this conversation, and George is kind of talking kind of underneath the surface about teamwork and how when things come together, they're so much better than you ever imagined them to be. A boat can go faster than you think it can go if you have all the right pieces in place. And then he says, it'd be a shame to not see what this boat could do with all the right pieces in place.
Yeah, and he's talking about the boat, but he's also talking about the team.
Yeah.
And then he gets a little bit more pointed at Joe.
Yeah.
And basically says, you know, hey, all you've known throughout your life is quitting.
Yeah.
That's what your dad showed you.
Yeah.
And you're not your dad, are you?
Yeah, he asked him this really pointed question of like, are you just going to quit like your dad quit on you? And you can see in that moment, like Joe is oiling the boat, but you can see in the moment he kind of stops and begins to think. And then the scene closes out. That's the end of the night. The next morning, the morning of the race, his coach and the coach's wife, they're in the lobby of the hotel, and you see Joe sitting there just waiting for them. And as they get up and begin to leave, Joe jumps up, goes to coach, and he's like, I've got to have my seat back. Like, I want this seat back. And you see Joe really fighting for his spot. And his coach asked him a great question, like, why should I give you the seat back? Like, why do you really want this back? And Joe begins kind of defending it. He's like, I've worked so hard. I'm one with the team. You know, he's really saying I deserve it. And then he makes this statement. He's like, it's all I've got, and I can't lose that. It's a powerful moment between the two of them.
Yeah, it is. And so the coach lets him back on the team, tells him to go suit up, and then it cuts to the race. And you know, you see the coaches trying to inspire their teams and talk to them.
Yeah, you've got Cornell, you've got Penn, you've got Navy, you've got Cal, you've got Princeton, you've got Washington. You've got all these like Ivy League schools, and it's really a picture, and the book talks a little bit about this. It's really a picture of those who have and those who have not. You have these boys from Washington who are, you know, in the middle of the Great Depression, just don't have anything, and they're fighting. This is all they've got. And then you've got a picture of boys who actually have things and money and aren't struggling as much as the others. So you have this like tension between that as well.
And that desperation drives this team to greatness.
Yeah.
And they learn to work together and to trust each other. And, you know, kind of the echo of George, his comment, some boats you really remember. Well, turns out they're going to really remember this team because they...
Well, we haven't said this, that the winner of this race actually gets to go to Berlin to compete in the 1936 Olympics. And so it's a big deal. Like they are fighting for a chance. I mean, think about this.
it's the JV boat who gets a chance to race, and then they get a chance to race at nationals, and the winners of nationals get to go to Berlin and compete in the Olympics. So some boys who had nothing who now have this opportunity in front of them. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah. And I think this movie is it's a beautiful movie, and it's a true story, so it in itself is inspiring, but the picture is beautiful, and the race is really it's cool. I actually found myself like getting into the movie, like leaning forward, like cheering on I'm like, I don't know anything really about rowing at all, but it's a great scene, and they start behind, but then you see them start to push each other, and there's one guy in the boat that's kind of a cheerleader and telling everybody, barking directions, and he's really pushing them to go faster and faster. And then at the very end, they win, and so.
Seriously, spoiler alert, they win?
They win the race.
They do? Do they make it to the Olympics? I don't know. Okay, they do, because the book says, like right here, 9 Americans and their epic quest for gold at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. But this scene is such a cool one, because they really are neck and neck, and they start behind, but then they power through at the end, and they end up winning by a pretty long shot. And it's an inspiring movie. Like I said, the book is a great book from what I've heard. I actually haven't read it all. The movie's really, really good. We'd highly recommend the movie. And the little lessons, there's actually little lessons spread throughout. It's not just the big ones that we're talking about in the movie series, but there's some great lessons all the way throughout. Movie's rated PG-13, I believe.
Yeah, there's a few moments where like little kids maybe shouldn't watch it, but overall a really good movie, directed by George Clooney, I believe, and so it's good. It's a great movie. We hope you get a chance to watch it, and again, an inspiring true story, some great lessons, real characters in there, and again, I think you said this before, but I think there's a lot of fun being in the room watching these scenes. So we hope that you can make it for the other 4 weeks of the movie series.
You know what we're watching next week? It's an under the radar movie as well, and so many people haven't even heard of it. Next week we're going to watch. Well, you got to show up. We don't tell people before, so nice try online. You don't get to know what it is, but hey, this week, Boys in the Boat. You can rent it online in a lot of different places. I think Apple TV is where I originally saw it, or get on a plane and fly somewhere.
Wear
and watch
your
it on the
Olympic
plane.
gear.
Oh, I wore my Olympic shirt for that very reason.
Grab some popcorn.
Grab some popcorn. And join us next week for At the Movies.
What a story. Now, what's interesting is that this was the JV boat, and Coach Olbertson took a huge gamble in sending the JV boat over the varsity boat because he saw potential. It's amazing. We have more potential than we think if we'll trust the one who puts us in the right place, right? I mean, we learn in movies like this and true stories what can happen when hard work and humility, the themes, hard work and humility, when you can overcome pain to fully trust the people around us and build the team. The team is more important than each individual that makes up that team, and that's exactly what Paul was saying when it comes to the church. Now, the passage of Scripture, a couple things, and we'll wrap up. the passage of Scripture that I just can't get past when I see something like this, or I see a marathon, the end of a marathon, is a passage that was written that says, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance. There's that word again. The idea, the concept of endurance, pushing through, not quitting, not giving up, not walking away, the race that God has put before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Jesus was able to push through the pain and experience the joy by keeping his eyes focused on the will of his heavenly Father. Now, in this movie, I watched it a few times over the last few months to try to understand more and more. And the piece that I kept missing until this week is probably, for me, the most important and the biggest takeaway. And so it's going to be my biggest challenge to you. And it's this little picture. I have this picture of the crew, the team, rowing. And what I finally realized is that the crew never sees the finish line. They have no idea. They have no idea how far they have to go. They have to trust the one sitting at the helm, who's pacing them, who's encouraging them, who continually calls them to keep their eyes up. Come on, this will preach. You know what that position is called in crew? Does anybody know? Coxswain. Yep, this is the coxswain, which literally is translated boat servant, the servant of the boat. It seems to me that Jesus said that he came not to be served, but rather to serve. And when Paul tells us we must keep our eyes on the author and perfecter of our faith, Jesus Christ, I mean, it just all fits together so well, doesn't it? They never see the finish line. They have to trust the one that is giving them the instructions, the encouragement. Keep your eyes up. Keep your eyes up. None of us knows when our end, when it's time for our lives to be done. None of us knows. He does. He knows what our race looks like, but we don't. Do we trust him? Do we keep our eyes fixed on the one who does see the entire race behind us? And I say behind us because it's in reverse. I started writing some thoughts, and I wrote this down, that the subtle lesson of rowing is to find the right rhythm with the team around you and row with endurance in the seat that you've been given as you trust the one who can see what you cannot. And I think this is true in all of life. Parents, those of you who are parenting from the youngest of kids to the teenagers, we live in a moment that is so easy to step away from the challenges that are all around us in parenting, to throw our hands up and say, it'll be fine, I'm just gonna let it go. Don't throw in the towel on parenting. Find the right rhythm in the boat that you've been given by God. Work with endurance to finish the race well. And you'll find joy. Even in the difficulty, you'll find joy. This is true in business and with those around us. And it's true in the church. It's true for us as a community. I have 3 questions that we're going to end with. Yeah, I know. It's a surprise. So here are my questions, and maybe one of these will jump out. Have you grown bitter? Have you fallen out of step, or have you let your eyes drift from the author of your faith? And I want you to be honest about that. Have you grown bitter in life? And is it time to deal with that? Have you fallen out of step, out of rhythm? And have you let your eyes drift from the one? Well, you can make a decision today to fix your eyes on Jesus Christ, the author and the perfecter of your faith. Joe and the others learned that hard work, humility, and fully trusting one another was necessary in order to reach the greatest goals in rowing. Are you missing any of those pursuits in your life? Are you just coasting? Thinking your time is done, or there's nothing left for you to do, or not? Hard work, humility, fully trusting the people around you. And number 3, Paul suggests that the church is like a body, and it is. Similar to the 8-man crew team in the movie. How are you using your gifts to help McDowell build the kingdom of God in this place, in this space, and in this time? And here's the deal, church. Don't miss this piece of it. McDowell will never be the boat that God has called us to be if you're not engaging your gifts for the greater good here. It just won't happen. We won't be able to do what God's called us to do unless all of us engage our gifts in the greater good. So, this is no surprise. I wanted to list our greatest needs for you at the church. And I asked all of our staff, and these are our greatest needs come fall. And now is the time to begin preparing for the fall, to begin working towards the fall. We've grown, the church has grown in the last couple years. We've kind of been on a 20% a year kind of growth path, which is significant, healthy, but it's also challenging in what we need. We have more kids in our kids ministry than we have in the past. We need help. And this is not me just saying, hey, anybody who's breathing and has a heartbeat, we need your help. This is me saying, if God would do something to stir that in you, we need you. Like, we just can't be what God's called us to be without you. We need 8 teachers this fall to serve twice a month during 1 hour. Yes, somebody, God is calling. Did you hear it? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. We have some special needs kids that it takes a little bit, something special, and we want to serve those families well. We need 3 partners who would be with one of our special needs kids during service. We need a couple storytellers. Student life, most of these are for the fall, but the first one is for the summer. We need a host home for 1 intern. We have 1 left. We need a host home for 1 intern. It's a guy, and he's allergic to pets. That's all I know. Okay. Community life, you can see what's there. We need 4 new small group leaders, book leaders for the fall. We need some prayer team members on Sunday mornings. And then over here on the worship tech team, we need 4 band members who are proficient and are able to, we need 3 vocalists. We have some tech, lighting, lyrics, camera crew. We'll train you to do all this. So here's the deal. If any of these things spark something in you, and if God stirs something in you, right now at Connect Central, the big blue banner, there's some people there hanging out wanting to write your name down and sign you up for the rest of your life. So, or you can email us, Matt@McDowell.Church, info@McDowell.Church, Cameron@McDowell.Church. Email us and let us know, and we will try to find the right place for you. Don't sit on the sidelines. Take the place that God has given you. Would you stand with me? I love our church. I'm so thankful for what God's doing here among us and within us. Don't you love this place? Yeah. McDowell, may God make his face to smile upon you. Every day as you rise up and then as you lay down in bed, may God bless you richly. And may you find joy in the life that God has put before you. Amen? Amen. Have a great week. Love you, McDowell.